I don't know about you, but I certainly like it when everything goes well. I like it when things go the way that I want them to go, when things are smooth, when they work out, when they're clear, when I don't feel blocked in the things that I desire to accomplish. But I've been challenged these days by the scriptures and their approach to how we process times of uncertainty, times maybe even of suffering or difficulty or frustration or pain, or when there's things in our way that we just can't remove. When Jesus is going to the cross, we read this interesting statement in John's Gospel. The night before he goes to the cross, Jesus is praying, and this is a part of what he says to the Father. He says, "Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son may glorify you." And this is an interesting thing to say, because Jesus is talking about the idea that in just a few hours, he's going to be taken, he's going to be beaten, he's going to be crucified. It's a painful and agonizing, a humiliating kind of death. It's a really deeply painful experience. But Jesus refers to this as a glorification. He's saying, "Father, would you glorify me that I might glorify you?" Jesus realizes that through this experience of the cross, he's accomplishing something powerful, something overwhelming. He's bringing redemption to humanity on a scale absolutely impossible to imagine from that point on. And so Jesus says, this is an act of glorification, this is a change, this is a transition. God is taking something that looks painful and awful, and he's redeeming it and bringing about a powerful sense of new life and hope and peace and freedom and transformation that we all benefit from through the suffering of Jesus. And I find it interesting that in the scriptures also that they continue to challenge us. For example, in 1 Peter, Peter's writing to the church and he's expressing a number of things to them, and he says, "Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because those who have suffered in their bodies are done with sin. As a result, they do not live the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, rather for the will of God. For you've spent enough time in the past doing evil kinds of things." This is an interesting concept for me because Peter takes this concept of Jesus going through a hard time and God bringing something beautiful and redemptive out of it, and he applies it also to our lives as well. And he's saying, if you're enduring a hard time, a difficult space, there is the possibility that God can use that, he can redeem it to bring about something beautiful and redemptive. And I think we're in this interesting space. Because when we suffer, when we go through hardship, when we experience difficulty or pain or something like that, we go in one of two different directions. Again, when we suffer, we can either become bitter and disgruntled or discouraged. We can become downtrodden. Sometimes we will turn away from our faith in Jesus. Sometimes we become very harsh and critical with the people around us. But there is another option. Peter reminds us that when we suffer in our bodies, when we go through a hard time, when we journey through something painful and difficult, this can actually bring about a redemptive purpose in our lives. It can move us to the space where we feel like, probably not completely, but the idea that we are done with sin. It sanctifies us, it changes us, it brings about redemption, it changes our focus and our perspective, so that we are no longer living for ourselves, we're no longer doing deceitful and destructive things. Now we are pursuing the will of God, because somehow through the hard space, God has purified us. He's strengthened us, he's made us more whole. Again, I think in this experience and in every other experience of our lives, we have an opportunity before us. How will we choose to respond to moments that are discouraging or hard or painful? How do we choose to be refined and purified and strengthened going through hard times rather than being just discouraged and overwhelmed, becoming bitter and disgruntled, and going in a negative direction? Again, I think it comes down to this point. It comes down to the moment of choosing to believe that Jesus can actually bring something good out of these moments. It brings us hope in the midst of that space. But in order to do that, we have to give up a very deeply held North American view that we believe we are entitled to everything going well. We believe that we are entitled to be able to move freely, to accomplish everything exactly the way that we want it to be, to live a life of comfort and ease. We believe that this is ours by right. And again, we see throughout the scriptures that so often we are reminded there is suffering, there is pain, there is hardship in this life. This is a broken and a fallen world. And God is bringing redemption. But in those moments, we're so often jarred because we believe that it's our right to experience comfort. We believe it's our right for things to go exactly the way that we want them to go. But what if when we experience hardship or pain, we could say, okay, Jesus, could you do something different in me through this? Could you use this experience of hardship, even though you didn't cause it, can you use this experience of hardship in my life to bring about something good, to reshape my soul? That I would be more finished with sin, that I'd be more passionate about you, that I would be more deeply invested in the kingdom of God, and that I would be less susceptible to the temptations of the world that would pull me to use my life in the accumulation of things that don't really matter in the long term. That I would choose your glory over my comfort. Again, this is a hard decision to continue to make, but it's possible that this can produce in us really deep and life-giving fruit. In the beginning of James, James says something like, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Or he says something like that, because I'm not actually looking at it at this moment. But again, it's possible for us that we can go through seasons, times and spaces of hardship, and we can come out on the other side more mature and more complete, more fully and faithfully devoted to God, more passionately His, and less susceptible to temptation. And I think during the season where there are so many hard things going on all around us, if nothing else, I think the presence of God is challenging us. He's inviting us to go deeper and further with Him, to choose to trust Him, to put our whole hope in Him, to make Him our first love all over again, the deepest desire of our heart, to be again a people fully devoted and passionately committed to Him, who will pursue Him in anything, regardless of what's going on in the rest of our lives. Again, as you engage in this devotional today and in the days to come, I want to encourage you just to spend a minute with Jesus and invite Him in. Invite Him into these moments in your life. In any particular space where you're experiencing discouragement or pain or frustration or resentment or bitterness, anything that's hard or difficult or not the way that you want it to be, anything that's uncomfortable, would you just offer it to Him and say, "Jesus, would you take this and use this to make me more like you? Would you protect me from the temptations to become bitter and disgruntled and frustrated and angry or discouraged and despairing? And would you instead reshape my soul so that I'm more committed to you than I am to my own comfort, so that I'm more passionate about you and your glory than I am about the things that I may want in my own personal experience? That I would move through this space, that I would be increasingly done with sin, that I would come out of this more mature. Would you be gracious to do this in my life?"